All right, I think we'll get started. I'm going to turn on our webcams so that you can see all of us here. One moment. If someone could just let me know via the chat box if you can see both me and Hillary and Gloria's webcams, that would be helpful. And while I do that, I'll just introduce the webinar itself and we'll get started. I want to welcome all of you to our webinar, Let's Talk About Recycling and Accessibility. My name is Allison Majerus, and I'm the Office Coordinator for the Nebraska Recycling Council. The Nebraska Recycling Council's mission is to maximize the economic and environmental benefits of resource recovery in Nebraska and waste nothing. A few housekeeping items. During the webinar, you can type your questions into the question box as they come to mind. We will wait until the end of the discussion today to address any questions you have. And if you have a technical issue with GoToWebinar, I'll do my best to answer you if you send a message to the chat box. A recording of this webinar will be emailed out to all registrants, and it will also be available following the webinar on our website under resources on the webinar page. Today, we will hear from two women with physical disabilities on what their experience as a citizen has been with recycling. Our panelists today are Hillary Scanlon, the founder and CEO of STIL Solutions in Toronto, Canada, and Gloria Eddins, the ADA coordinator for the state of Nebraska. Hillary is blind and Gloria uses a wheelchair. According to the CDC, 25.6% of adults in the US live with a disability. And in Nebraska, 22.2% of adults live with a disability. This is an important topic for the recycling industry to consider, and we are excited to welcome Hillary and Gloria into the conversation today. So first, we want to ask all attendees to answer two questions so we can get to know you better and your intentions about attending today. I will use our polling system to do this so we can get to know you better. So I'm going to release the first question here. Why did you decide to attend today's webinar? Okay, so the poll for why did you decide to attend today's webinar, 92% of those in attendance said that they work in recycling and are interested in learning more. And 8% of people said they have a disability. Okay, so a majority of people are work in recycling and are interested in learning more. The second question we wanted to ask, have you ever thought to make waste management and recycling accessible prior to hearing about this webinar? Okay, so the answers, 64% said yes, they have thought about making waste management and recycling accessible before hearing about this webinar, and 36% said no, they hadn't thought about that. So thank you both. Thank you all for participating in that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and we will get started on our questions. If you'll just bear with me, I'm going to make sure I don't have any. Thank you, Matthew, for letting me know that you can see and hear me and hear us. I appreciate that feedback. So we'll get started. As you may have noticed, I didn't really give a long introduction of our two panelists today because I wanted them to share their background with us directly. So I don't know who wants to go first, Hillary or Gloria, but would you both please share your background and your experience with recycling as a person with a disability? I don't know who wants to go first.
I don't mind jumping in. This is Hillary speaking. All right, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's session and for answering those questions. I just wanted to get a baseline for understanding why people were attending this session and if they generally had a fundamental understanding of accessibility and its intersection with recycling and sustainability. So thank you so much again for attending and for completing that. So my name is Hillary Scanlon. I am 26 years old and I am from Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. My business, STIL Solutions, is located in Toronto, Ontario. STIL stands for Sustainability Through an Inclusive Lens, and we are a social enterprise that works to make waste management more accessible to people with disabilities specifically, but more broadly to people of all abilities. I started STIL Solutions 5 years ago after I suddenly and unexpectedly lost my vision. At the time, I was really just frustrated with the inaccessibility of the built environment, but I was particularly frustrated with my personal inability to complete seemingly simple tasks such as proper waste disposal. I was always someone who was really passionate about the environment and about environmental stewardship. And now that I had acquired this disability, I was no longer able to participate in, again, just these very seemingly simple tasks, such as proper waste disposal. So I started STIL Solutions out of a frustration with my personal problem, or out of a personal frustration or a personal problem with the system. From there, we quickly discovered that this is a much bigger issue than just for people with vision loss. It's really an entire system that's inaccessible to people with disabilities and with diverse lived experiences. I'll pause there and let Gloria jump in to give her introduction.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Gloria Eddins. I am the State of Nebraska ADA Coordinator. I've been in that role for a little over 2 years now. I've used a wheelchair for, I don't know, a decade maybe. Been a wheelchair user, and I am passionate about making our community accessible in the best way, and that includes recycling. I have been down the rabbit hole of trash and waste management for quite a few months now for my neighborhood, and that the biggest piece of that seems to be to get people to recycle. And if we can't do it because we are using a wheelchair, then that's roadblock number one. So I want to see all recycling, wherever it's at, accessible to anybody who wants to use it. And the more we can do that, the longer we can save our landfill, which is a huge plus for our city and for our globe. That's me.
Great, thank you both. We'll just get started. I just want to ask next, what barriers to recycling have you both encountered?
Well, I use a wheelchair. So the recycling, I live in Lincoln, Nebraska, in case that was not put out there earlier, born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska. The recycling centers in Lincoln are very difficult to use from a wheelchair. So if I have, City of Lincoln has a cardboard ban, so let's just use cardboard as our example, that if I wanted to use the cardboard, if I can get it out into my car on my own, depending on the size of the box. Sometimes that's easy, sometimes that's a little more difficult. Then I get to the recycling center, I have to unload my wheelchair, get into the wheelchair, get the cardboard again on my lap, and then try to lift it into the open spot that is not technically within reach range, and hope there's been no dumping that's going to pop my tires in the meantime. So it's just been a struggle. And even within a business or in the business office world, recycling large sums of paper. Yes, I had desk recycling, which was great, but if there was a large stack, we wanted to take it to the large bin. Did the last person who used that bin leave it open, or am I now struggling to get that very large top open to dump my recycling in there?
Okay. And Hillary, what kinds of things have you encountered?
So I'll walk people through two different kind of experiences. So when I initially lost my vision, the mobility tool that I first acquired was a white cane, a long white cane. When I had that, I was a university student, and my issues with trash were surrounding, okay, where do I dispose of this coffee cup that I've chugged down before a lecture or class? And then I'm left with determining, okay, as a person with vision loss, how do I dispose of this? Often I ended up carrying my waste around with me, putting it in my bag until I got home, or until I was in a familiar location to dispose of my waste. But even if I happen to stumble upon a waste container, I'm still further challenged by the fact that, one, it's really difficult to confirm if something is a waste container without having to get really up close and personal with that waste container. And that's especially important to consider, that the hygiene component of that during COVID, that's been top of mind, but that was one of the original motivations for myself to start STIL Solutions, was because I did not want to get up close and personal with garbage, as most people don't. When I got my beautiful yellow lab guide dog Margarita from California in 2019, I was faced with an additional problem. So now if I'm out and about and Margarita, a lovely yellow lab, has to poop, as she does, I have to pick it up, and I'm then left with carrying a literal bag of crap around for the rest of the day. There's no kind of standardization, both in the US and Canada, in terms of what's accepted in different recycling jurisdictions, what's not accepted, which waste streams they have. So generally the lack of standardization is one of the main causes for confusion, definitely amongst people with vision loss and people with disabilities. But the general population as well really suffers, because we're all kind of looking for a 2 or 3 second solution that we don't have to think about. And if the system changes in every environment that we're going into, that makes that process much more inaccessible.
Okay, thank you for sharing those experiences with us. Can you also speak at all, and maybe this would apply more to Hillary, but also just learning about what's available in terms of waste and recycling in your town? Do you have any struggles with finding information online or through signage? Can you speak to that at all, about inaccessible digital media, perhaps, Hillary?
Yeah, so one of the most important things for people with disabilities in terms of almost everything is that we have access to information. We need to understand what systems are in place and what are not. And generally you can find this information by going to, for instance, like your municipal website. However, it's not active enough. There's not a strategic approach to really connect with people with disabilities in, sorry, my screen reader, in different communities and environments. It's more of a passive approach. But I think that if we really want to have impact, we really do need to be actively communicating and directly communicating with people with disabilities to get their input and understanding of waste management. In terms of signage, again, that's one of the big issues with regards to a lack of standardization or consistency. So as an individual with vision loss, I'm nearly totally blind, and I rely almost totally on my sense of touch and what I can hear in the environment around me. I can also smell what's around me, I suppose, but I don't want to be sniffing out garbage. I'll leave that to another animal. Yeah, there's just no consistency for how things are written on signage. Some places like to put different graphics or text. They use different colors to reference their bins. So for people with minimal vision or who have who are colorblind, for instance, that poses an additional barrier.
Okay.
I wanted to talk just briefly about the web accessibility. We really strive with the state of Nebraska to meet WCAG 2.1. I will fully admit that there are websites we're going to hit, and especially with municipalities that don't meet those guidelines, and that creates a struggle by itself. We also have great like Facebook and social media that a lot of the health departments and such post stuff on, like for hazardous material pickups and those type of things. If those posts don't meet WCAG 2.1, we run into struggle, or if they're posting videos that aren't closed captioned or that don't have alt text on their pictures, we run into struggles with that. And I do end up with a lot of those complaints. In fact, for the longest time, my #1 complaint across the state of Nebraska was simply closed captioning any video you put out. That's been a huge struggle that we have taken huge strides on improving, but I think more can be done to constantly keep that in your mind. If you're running your agency's social media site, are you making that accessible to anybody who wants to read it so that they can partake in those great events that you guys have that are going on? I would also say that any description you can give somebody of your recycling sites, this is what you need to be required to do physically. This is the signage that's available at those sites. So that, again, I don't load all my stuff up in my vehicle, drive down there to realize there's no way I am able to get the stuff from my vehicle into that car. So any of those descriptions you can put on those sites of what's available, what's accessible, what's not accessible. I mean, at some point you got to own it, but that saves time on making a trip that is futile.
And often people with disabilities have to really go out of their way, as Gloria described, to dispose of their waste independently. And that's an added financial cost, for instance. I definitely cannot drive, so I would have to pay for a taxi in Nebraska, or in Lincoln, Nebraska specifically, to dispose of my waste, and that's a financial barrier. And for people with disabilities who are significantly underemployed or unemployed, that's just something else to consider. Great point, Gloria.
I think we've transitioned from speaking about or naming some of the barriers to recycling to what kinds of recommendations the two of you might have for municipalities, haulers, recycling centers to make recycling more accessible to people with disabilities. And so if you want to continue in that vein of what kinds of recommendations you have for people involved in the recycling industry, and perhaps if you could speak both to rural and urban areas where those recommendations could vary depending on what kind of place we're talking about. So yeah, what kinds of recommendations would you have to increase accessibility to recycling? Oh, hello.
Gloria, do you want to jump in first?
Go ahead, Hillary. No,
I'm
you're
on
still
mute?
muted.
Oh, okay. Can people hear?
There you go.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, no.
Oh, wait.
Hello?
Yes.
There's.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try and speak before it gets out again. And just at any point in time, if I cut out, it's probably because I did cut out. So if you can just jump in and let me know. So I'll start out by, I guess, listing some recommendations that I have for both environments, and then go into some specific recommendations that I might have for recycling programs and industries in more rural environments. So people, for both environments, people with disabilities and those of other marginalized identities in general, need to be part of the conversation and decision-making process when you're designing and implementing waste management and recycling programs. You really don't know what you don't know. So you need to broaden your stakeholder group to ensure that you serve the needs of 100% of the community rather than simply the statistics that Allison mentioned at the beginning, the 75% of Americans. There's still 25% who are marginalized due to their disability, and that shouldn't be the case at all. So by simply hiring and including people in these processes moving forward, you'll be able to notice and identify these gaps that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to identify just simply based on your positionality and your identity. The other component that we just talked about is definitely access to accessible information. And one of the spaces that I've lived in, they provided all residents with a recycling calendar. And that's kind of a nice tool for people to have, but it's not for people with vision loss. And in Canada, the statistics of individuals with vision loss are 4% of the population. So if 4% of the population doesn't know what the recycling system is in their particular jurisdiction, that can have major implications on the rest of the system. The third recommendation I have in general is to look for champions within your community. So really looking for groups and individuals who are passionate about sustainability and recycling, who you can support their initiatives and then look for their support back on your initiatives as you're trying to roll out the programs. It's really difficult to just go into a community and implement a system again if you don't have that community buy-in. Finally, for both, I would say we need to reassure people that if they do their jobs effectively and recycle properly, the industry will also do their jobs. The industry will also do their job and basically use their grassroots efforts of the community to do things like selling and repurposing recycled materials and minimizing landfill expansion. So it's really important to tie the outcomes that are of your recycling program to the community in some way. Often people, when they dispose of their trash, they don't see its impact anywhere else. As a result, it's discouraging for some to actually recycle. They feel like they're not making an impact. So if you make those impacts really clear and concise, I think that that's going to be much better. In terms of urban environments, the only kind of recommendation that I have is that basically every inch of the landscape in an urban environment provides critical information. So we need to really ensure that this information is standardized and accessible. So in both Canada and in the US, our populations are aging, which means that the percentage of people with disabilities will continue to grow. So to ensure that various industries continue to meet their targets and to ensure that we as a collective can continue to live in a sustainable environment, we need to design and implement systems that account for the inevitable and diverse human experiences. 25% of individuals in the US have a disability right now. However, disability is one of the only marginalized identities that we will all experience at some point in our lifetimes due to injury, disability, illness, etc. I'm going to let Gloria jump in here. I have a few thoughts on rural, but I feel like Gloria might be able to fill this gap a bit better than I can. So Gloria, I'll pass it over to you.
I think on so many levels we struggle with rural Nebraska, specifically with access and services for people with disability. Many of the towns have aging infrastructure, which isn't accessible simply because it was built long before ADA was even talked about, let alone put into action. So that's constantly a struggle. I'm very grateful in Lincoln that I have curbside recycling and I have an able-bodied husband that I still like. So I think it's important that if you think, the people that are on this group, if you think about it and you walk up to something and you can tell, how would I use this if I didn't have vision? How would I use this if I was still using in a chair? Then that education starts to spread and you ask the question, well, what can we do to make it accessible? And if we continually do that all the time, what a different world we could live in if people just have it in their mind. Like your poll said, how many people just have never even thought about how I would recycle if I was disabled or had a disability? That's part of it. I was excited when I was doing some research for this presentation that there are some towns that offer recycling at their door by an application process if they have a disability. They exist, not in Lincoln and not any in Nebraska that I am aware of, but they do exist across the United States if there's an application process through the city. And I assume those cities are also city-ran garbage collection and recycling collection, which we do not have specifically in Lincoln, Nebraska. But that was amazing to me that that was even an option anywhere. It also just those recycling centers, are we making them accessible? Can somebody drive up and get some assistance maybe once in a while? That somebody would be there to help them unload their car or do those type of things. Are specific events, you know, I know they have events in rural Nebraska. Are those accessible? What type of help is there? Do they have a reasonable accommodation disclaimer on the bottom of their event flyer? If you need additional help, here's who you contact, here's who you talk to, and we can see what we can work out. Because many times what I find, you know, we changed our slogan a few years back, but I still find Nebraska's nice. And if you ask for help, somebody's going to help you. It would be nice if we didn't always have to ask for help, that we could do it on our own and be independent, just like everybody wants to be. But at least if there was an option to say, ask this person for help, we'll make it happen. If you have a neighbor with a disability, are you offering, hey, I'll take your recycling, it's no big deal for me. Those type of things create a community that finds the importance in recycling and helps everybody to achieve that. Signage is a huge thing and information is a huge thing, whether it's online, through those social media accounts, through whatever way you're getting the information out there. Is that information accessible and available to use for all? With knowledge is power. Back to you, Hillary.
What I'll just quickly add is that as much as I can provide suggestions and recommendations for how to make your recycling program more accessible, my biggest recommendation for everyone is to ask people with disabilities directly. They know best what they need. I have a particular experience as someone with vision loss living in Canada.
Sorry, Hillary, you're cutting out again. For those in Nebraska, whoops, you're cutting out again, Hillary.
The people in your community who have disabilities may have very different experiences and needs. So, so, hello?
Well, yeah, you're cutting out kind of bad there. I think you're back. There you go.
Try again.
We have a storm, a thunderstorm in Peterborough, and that might be affecting my my connection. Just wanted to reiterate that ask the people in the community what they need and what they want. Assumptions don't get you too far with people with disabilities and those of other marginalized communities. It's best to just ask what you can do for them, and then look at building a mutually kind of beneficial relationship between the two of you, the disabled community in that region and the recycling industry.
I reiterate that it's so important just to ask. I worked for Game and Parks Commission for years and years, and I was the one that used the wheelchair. So Game and Parks is a different beast than a lot of other things, because how do you make fishing accessible and all these different outdoorsy areas accessible to somebody in wheelchairs? And many times they would just come to my desk and say, hey, will this work? What a huge question that is when at least you're thinking about the fact, well, how is somebody in a wheelchair going to access this fishing pier or this canoe launch or anything of those type of things? So I say that all the time, ask. If you don't know who to ask, reach out to me. I have an ADA task force, which we have representation from the deaf and hard of hearing community. We have representation from the blind individuals. We have representation of cognitive disabilities and a few other disabilities, but you know, I'm always willing to ask that group, hey, what do you guys suggest for this situation? And they're always happy to respond.
One thing I'll just mention, before the webinar, I did do some research and called some larger cities in the Midwest, and there are examples of cities that do have the application process that you mentioned, Gloria, for assistance if you have a disability. I'm for sure, I know that Omaha offers that here in Nebraska, as well as Madison, Wisconsin. Fargo, North Dakota does as well. And I'm sure there's other communities as well. I just kind of hit a couple of larger cities in the region to see if that was available. But that's always a great offering for haulers, for municipal services to provide. So yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. This is kind of a side topic, but it's something that we wanted to ask if we could speak briefly on straws.
Oh, this is my topic.
Yes, Gloria wanted to mention some things about straws. So if you want to share your thoughts about straws.
We seem to get, I don't know when straws became political, but at some point throughout life, they are killing the wildlife. They're huge things, and it's not very easily recyclable. And so there's a big debate about straws. So a city will come through and say, nope, no plastic straws. And then we have the disabled community yelling, we need our straws. So my suggestion is to say, don't put the straws out on the table. Have them request a straw. What happens is people can't always use a cup. The paper straws do not work for mouth breathers at all. So many different types of people with disabilities do need a straw, use a straw. So, but there's ways to lessen that impact. If we got rid of all the straws in the United States, would it have a huge impact? Yes. But can we lower that number and make a huge impact just by not putting them on the table every single time somebody sits down at your restaurant? So to think about that type of thing, I personally come packing my straw all the time because I do know I want my straw. So, but it's just something to think about, that can we just have them by request instead of saying no straws, we're done. Thank you for letting me talk about straws.
I just wanted to quickly mention that each of these intersections where there is an apparent barrier between people with disabilities being able to access sustainable services or processes or products, etc., each of those barriers and intersections is an opportunity for innovation and development and for creation and even for profit. The market for reusable straws, specifically the reusable silicone straws, skyrocketed after this debate occurred. So just another example of the ways in which, yes, there are barriers, but each of these barriers are also an opportunity for innovation.
Yeah, both of you, great points. Thank you for sharing that. I think we will end today by opening it up for questions. We already have two in the question box. And so at this time, if any attendees have questions for Hillary and Gloria, enter them into the question box. And while you do that, I just want to mention that we do have kind of a next step resource for anyone who wants to look into this. We have created an accessibility topic section within our community toolkit on our website. So I will show you that specific link in a moment. We'll drop the link into the section. I will drop the link into the chat box as well so everyone can read it. But it has a lot of documents about how to make your social media more accessible, how to make documents accessible, how to make your website accessible, just to get you started on making digital media, like both of them have said how important that is for information to be accessible to all people. So that's kind of a next step. Our first question for the two of you: can screen readers pick up images on garbage or recycling bins?
Really good question. So I use a few applications that it's not a screen reader, it's more of an artificial intelligence application. It's called Seeing AI, SEEING, and then capital AI. It's a Microsoft application that lets you scan different aspects of your environment, and based on its artificial intelligence, it will get back to you with what it thinks it's seeing. So it's not totally accurate, but it's an option, and it's a free option that I would recommend that people with vision loss do download. With that in mind, however, you need data to use those in public spaces or when you're out in public. And that also comes with the assumption, for instance, that people have smartphones. And unfortunately, that's just not the case for whatever reason. A number of people don't want a smartphone, but additionally, a number of people can't afford a smartphone. And as I mentioned previously, people with disabilities are very much unemployed and underemployed based on their qualifications. And as a result, the financial barrier to having a phone adds to that issue with screen reading signage. So one of the better things to do is just make the signage in of itself accessible. Don't place the responsibility of accessibility necessarily on the individual with a disability to determine what's on your sign. Make it accessible from the start.
Great, thank you. The next question, did you have something else, Hillary?
Oh, I was just going to say, if that didn't answer your question, happy to elaborate.
Okay, great. How can we know if our website and social media is accessible?
There's a great Google, if you open that website in Google Chrome, and they have a little accessibility checker on there that will give you at least a baseline. I mean, really, you want somebody to check it out fully for you, but at least that will give you the baseline of things that are blaringly wrong. It's under tools, Google Access. I can't walk you through it, I'm sorry, but I know in Google Chrome, if you go into the tools on the right-hand side drop down, there is an accessibility link that will do a check on your website pretty quickly.
There's also a website where you can insert specific URLs of your website into it, and it does a full scan on the back end for you. But from there, you need to know where you're going from there. Like, okay, what do all these mean? But that's a resource that we can definitely add to, if it's not already there, the Nebraska Recycling Council's accessibility section.
Yes. We have about 10 documents in the community toolkit. So if people are interested in finding out if their website and social media is accessible, I would start with the community toolkit documents, and then from there are additional resources within those documents if you really want to take a deep dive. The next question says, Hillary, I'm sorry if I missed you saying this while I was taking notes, but as an educator, I am always trying to make my outreach content more accessible, and I'd love to hear what your ideal accessible guidelines signs would look like above a recycling, and then it cut off. So I'm assuming she wanted to say would look like above a recycling container, I'm guessing.
Right, so I'll give you, this is my chance for a mini sales pitch then. So
Okay.
at STIL Solutions, we try to bridge the gap between sustainability and accessibility. And we do that by providing institutions and communities with a product known as Waste Finder. And Waste Finder is actually a signage system, a tactile signage system that is placed on the ground directly in front of waste containers. It is a product and a type of signage that you can detect under your foot, through a cane or other mobility device, such as a wheelchair or a walker. And it doesn't require any language or text. So it's really an accessible tool for people of all abilities. So it's a type of signage that someone with vision loss, can feel. It's a type of signage that an individual with dyslexia, for instance, who might have trouble reading or interpreting waste management signage, they can use this system, because we fully rely on colors and shapes to communicate our product and what its meaning is. And shapes and colors are thankfully universal across all languages. So another group that we've really enjoyed working with, for instance, is in Canada, New Canadians, people whose first language is neither English or French, because again, the elimination of language is really helpful in for people who are new to a space, for people with disabilities, just adding that consistency. In terms of signage above waste containers, I also think that that's really important, because that's generally where people are going to be looking initially. Some other resources that we can add to that community toolkit are, for instance, clear print guidelines that identify the best, if you're going to have a print document, what is the best way to display that, what colors to use, making sure that the contrast is correct, making sure that you're using fonts that are readable and legible. I will quickly mention that Braille is often a common go-to or a default option when trying to make accessible signage. I would highly recommend that you consult and consider the community where you're trying to install that signage, because in Canada, for instance, only 10% of the population of individuals with vision loss know how to read Braille and use it as their main source of literacy. That might be very different depending on which community you're in, but generally Braille is being phased out within the blind community just because we have so many other ways of communicating with each other.
That has adjusted here somewhat. There was the trend that Braille was starting to go be phased out, and now there is a large push to bring it back because of the reading skills incorporated with Braille use. So that's been a shift recently within the United States. Here more recently, that there's a push to go back to Braille.
Okay. Yeah, I would just consider, like, you
Absolutely.
can definitely add Braille. Braille is an excellent addition, but consider the fact that it's not making the product accessible to people with vision loss as a whole. It's more so checking a box. Absolutely.
The universal signs for recycling. And again, do you want to put your fingers on a gross garbage can to figure out the Braille that's there?
Never. Even the Braille on the bathroom signs, like I don't really want to read those either.
We have another question. Since the majority of today's participants are from the recycling industry, what are the top 2 or 3 actions we could take now to positively impact accessibility?
I think the easy win is the information you put out online is accessible, fully accessible. I think that's a huge gap, and it's something that should be done and easy to do and doesn't cost you more other than possibly your programmers. And signage. So we know what to expect when we get there and how we can accomplish it. And then just that information sharing of we're going to think about this in the future. If we buy a new recycling bin, we're going to make sure it's more accessible than the ones we have. Those type of things. I know most of us are working for nonprofits or for municipalities that budgets are tighter than they've ever been. So I keep that in mind when I say stuff. But when you're moving forward to build something new, let's make it accessible and get it right the first time.
Yeah. And just adding on to that, in order to do that, I would suggest one of the first actionable items that people should be doing after today's session is looking inward into their own industry and recycling company and almost doing an audit of accessibility, disability, figuring out, do you have enough voices or stakeholders at the table, people with disabilities that are informing your decisions? Are they non-existent? Are you only bringing them in after the fact, for instance? So just doing a general accessibility audit to understand where accessibility is prioritized within your particular business or not-for-profit. That would be my number one recommendation. I think that from there, the individuals who you contact will provide you with next steps. They'll provide you with kind of step 2 as to the direction that you, specifically your industry, needs to move in.
Great points. Thank you both. There aren't any more questions in the question box right now. Are there any final thoughts you want to share before we end today, either of you?
I would again like to thank everybody who came and signed up and learned something new today that you're going to walk away with. And when you walk out, just notice. That is such a huge win when somebody notices, oh, this isn't compliant. This doesn't work for everyone. Because you think about it, the next time you're going to purchase something or the next time you're making any type of change, once that thought's in your head. So I appreciate each of you taking the time today.
Yeah, I would definitely just echo that. Again, people don't know what they don't know, and by you attending this session, you're much more aware, and I hope that you're able to share that information with your colleagues and others in the space. before this session started today, we were talking about the fact that it's historic in a lot of ways, just because of the fact that accessibility has not had a space in sustainability conversations, and specifically in conversations surrounding recycling and waste management. So thank you so much for taking part in history today, and really hoping to hear from a number of the attendees if they have any more questions or if they're interested in examining STIL Solutions and our products. We have started working in the US. We've just started this past month, so I'll be excited to hear from you. And Allison, I think that we'll figure out a way to pass along my contact information.
Very good. I just put up both Gloria and Hillary's contact information, their email address, their website, their name, who they represent, as well as my name and email, phone number, and the Accessibility Toolkit webpage if you're interested in looking at that after the webinar today. We have a couple of comments, just people saying, Gloria and Hillary, thank you. You provided such valuable insight and information. I am so grateful for your knowledge, and we'll be finding more resources to incorporate accessibility into more of everything I do. This has been great. Thank you. So we've gotten some great responses from the attendees so far. So we'll keep the question box open if anyone has some last questions or comments. It's not quite.
I'm happy to linger here for a minute, for a while if people need anything.
Yeah,
absolutely. Please feel free to reach out with my email. You know, I'm a State of Nebraska employee, so your tax dollars are paying for me. So please utilize the information I have floating around in my brain. I would love to talk to any of you.
We'll just stay on if anyone else has other comments or questions. I lost the question box for a moment, so I had to reopen it here. Like, oh no. Oh, I see another question. One moment. I'm having some issues opening the window big enough. There we go. Okay. Gloria, do you know if you have counterparts in other states?
Yes, most states have an ADA coordinator. If you look within your state and for ADA coordinator, you should be able to find it pretty easy from a Google search. I think on last count, there was something 47 out of 50 states have an ADA coordinator. I know Louisiana is in the process right now of getting one. So Alaska has a fabulous one. But yeah, most states do have some form of an ADA coordinator, and most cities do as well. If you look under your city and municipality, if they have more than 50 employees, they should have an ADA coordinator.
Another question, any thoughts about asking for accessibility feedback from folks with disabilities in a way that isn't token and that's respectful?
I always like the question, does this work for you? I think that's a great, I would never ever find offense to that question. I think just like humans, you're gonna find your cranky people out there, but for most people, just like if you ask me, how do I open this door? I'm gonna tell you how to open the door, whether I have a disability or not. So I think just asking the question shows respect and to not assume.
Yeah, I'll definitely add to that because this is something that I've definitely experienced. There's an expectation that people with disabilities or people of other marginalized identities sometimes just have that information to offer. And sometimes they do, but that information is valuable and it's been gained through lived experience, through professional experience, and through education. So just as you would ask for business advice and pay for that advice in return, or financial advice, that's a service that you pay for. I would recommend looking at different compensation techniques or programs. One way to perhaps get around this is if you're the city or the region that you're operating in has an accessibility advisory committee. That's the equivalent in Canada. I'm not sure what the counterpart would be in the US. But those committees are specifically designed generally with people with disabilities on them to advise on these sorts of issues. Another thing is just to consider what you're asking of them in terms of, are you asking them to come to your space? What does that look like? Are you able to provide transportation for them? Just being considerate about these people do have lives. Like I work from 9 to 5 every day, so I wouldn't be able to just get up and leave. But just you're asking, how do we do this in a way that's not tokenizing? I think that you're already on the right track.
Okay, great.
Within the United States, we do have the ADA coordinators are a great resource. Within Nebraska, we have Disability Rights Nebraska. The university has a disability council. We don't necessarily have set disability advisory groups that are standard across the states, for lack of different words, but for each city or town, that if it's large enough, I know we're going to run into problems in rural areas. There's typically a simple Google search will show you what advocacy groups are working with the disabled in that particular area.
Okay, we have another question. The signs for STIL Solutions, can those be utilized with those that have mobility issues?
Great question. So yes, our product is called Waste Finder, and it was designed using the 7 principles of universal design. And that basically ensures that the product is as easy, as safe, as flexible to use as possible, regardless of what your experience is as an individual. So if you have a visual impairment, if you're hard of hearing, if you have a learning disability, what do you need to consider when interacting with a product to make sure that it's accessible? So we really did go through a rigorous checklist to ensure that the product was not only accessible to the people that are using them, but also to the devices that they are using to access them. So with that in mind, our product is ADA compliant, which means that its height restrictions and height requirements fall under ADA guidelines. So it should not present a tripping hazard or any type of hazard to people who are trying to use their mobility device to access the waste container. It also should not provide a barrier, for instance, for people who might have trouble lifting their feet due to Parkinson's, for instance. So they're very low to the ground. They're less than 1 centimeter thick total, and that provides enough tactile information for people of all abilities to independently locate when they're in the vicinity of a waste container, and then to identify which waste stream they're directly in front of which once you're there.
Great. All right, well, we've had a lively discussion today. I want to thank you both for participating in our webinar today and for all the people that have attended. And we will end the webinar now. I'm going to be posting the video. We're going to have the video posted hopefully very soon on our website. And we'll also be sending out a copy of the recording to everyone that has registered who may not have been able to attend live. So we thank you all for coming. Thank you both Hillary and Gloria for participating. This has been a great discussion. We hope all the information and experiences that you've shared will be useful to those that came today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Allison, for facilitating this and for organizing this, and for everyone that attended. And thank you so much for just being open to this perspective. Gloria, I learned a lot of things today from you. So even with people with disabilities, it's not a uniform or a homogenous community. So there's lots of things to learn. So thank you, Gloria.
Thank you, Hillary. I learned a ton from you as well. I love your product, I really do. Like, where can I have a line item budget for that across the state?
We're here. We're here and we're ready for you.
Awesome.
All right. Well, everyone have a good afternoon, and thank you again.
All right. Thanks, everyone.